What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Odd Man Rush, coming to you on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel and brought to you by Intense Nutrition in Coral Springs. I am David Dwork, your host. Welcome to the latest edition of our show. Today, I have a special guest joining me. We're going to talk some Panthers as we get into the second half of the season. Joining me is, well, you know who he is. He's a Panthers TV play-by-play voice, South Florida sports guy for probably longer than he wants to admit, Steve Goldstein. Goldie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. And yes, it has been a long time, so I won't admit it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Can you believe it's been like 10 years since we were working in radio? That doing the Cooper and Goldie show, like that blows me away how much time has passed, man. And you look exactly the same. You look great. Just gonna point that out.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do appreciate it.
So,
I'll take it.
Well, thank you again for joining me. I want to jump right into it. I think maybe kind of the big thing that's happening, the ripple effect that's going to, I think, impact the roster heading into the second half, at least for now. The return of Noah Chari, who has not played yet this season. He was injured in the preseason. Now he's going to come back. It looks like he's going to be ready when the team hits the ice later this week in Carolina. Goldie, in addition to, like, he's such a big help penalty killing. He's such a great defensive forward, but an area I think he's going to really help the team that they needed this year is in the faceoff circle. Coming off his best year in the faceoff circle last year, and the Panthers, I believe they're second to last in the league faceoff wise right now. But how big of an addition do you think Noah Chari is going to be there in the second half?
Well, you know, with the advancement of advanced stats and analytics, Dave, the more I look at the faceoff stats, the less I think they mean, to be honest with you. You mentioned the Panthers are second to last, and they're at the top of the standings. The Colorado Avalanche are in the bottom 4. They're number 1 in the standings, and the Vegas Golden Knights are one of the worst 5 teams in the faceoff circle. And if you took bets right now, I think a lot of people would put money on a Florida, Colorado, or Vegas Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
But that aside, and by the way, the reason for that is so much happens after the faceoff that I can win the faceoff. My team still may not get possession. But that aside, yeah, look, they are absolutely loaded up front. You add a guy with Stanley Cup final experience. You add a guy that obviously will be well rested and motivated.
Right.
And he's just another forward they could add to the puzzle. And obviously you're going to have injuries. And I've always said this, you're going to win the Stanley Cup. You need 16, 17 guys up front to get through it anyway. So it's great that they have them.
Yeah, I mean, earlier this season, we gave a lot of credit to Sergei Bobrovsky's great start to being a new father and kind of that motivation. Noah Chari's got kind of a similar vibe going because he's got a little one and another one on the way. So you mentioned the motivation. I mean, between not playing for, 5 months since the season started and growing a new family, I mean, he's going to be chomping at the bit to get going.
Yeah, and he's a free agent after this year, and he wants to keep playing hockey. He's still young enough. So, and by the way, the number one thing, Noah Chari is a great competitor. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. It was heartbreaking. They had Game 7 at home a few years ago in Boston when he was with the Bruins, and they came up short. So, that's number one for him. This guy wants to get a ring. So, like I said, between, watching practice and having Noah Chari and Joe Thornton and Frank Petrano and Maxime Mammon all playing as extra forwards, they're all, they've all played at times, and they're all going to be needed at some point. The schedule, by the way, before they even get to the playoffs, is so packed. So a couple of injuries, and suddenly that depth, isn't just a luxury; it's a necessity.
Yeah, you mentioned Maxime Mammon coming back he's been on the IR recently. Another guy that's coming back that's been on IR that's maybe one of the more important pieces to this team is Patrick Hornquist. He's been, I mean, interestingly enough, kind of a mainstay in the bottom 6, just the way that the roster has been so deep. But there was a good month or so when he was on that 4th line with Ryan Lomberg and Eetu Luostarinen. And that was maybe the most consistent line the team had for weeks on end. So getting him back, in addition to what he brings off the ice, it's going to be so key, right?
Well, that's the big one. I mean, look, Patrick Hornquist, I think it's actually understated by a lot of people, fans and certainly people outside of the Panthers, media and fans and team, what this guy means to this team. He changed the culture, man. I mean, I give him full credit. Him and, Ratko Gudas and, but really Hornquist changed the entire culture of this team. So his motivational ability, The way he plays, it's infectious. And we spent decades with the Florida Panthers having nobody in front of the net countless times. Why doesn't someone go to the net? Now you've got 1, 2, or even 3 guys on every line that go to the net and pay the price. We watch practice. Mason Marchman's out there, following him around afterwards, seeing how you deflect pucks. I've seen Owen Tippett do it at the net with him when Hornquist stays on for the extra time. So I just don't think it can be undersold. And what he's going to mean when they get into the playoffs. He was great against Tampa last year in that 6-game series. And let's be honest, he's had injuries. He plays the game as hard as anybody does. He's in his mid-30s. This may be, you never know what happens next year. A team that's really good one year may not be good the next year. You would think the Panthers will be right there again, but you never know. And no one knows that better than Patrick Hornquist. He will be, all out, because you never know if it's his last chance to try to win that cup. And by the way, the fact that he has 2 means absolutely nothing to him in terms of motivation. And, I already got 2. No, he's one of those guys. If they were ready to win it this year and they get a 3rd, he'll be just as hungry in September to get a 4th.
You talk about a guy like Patrick Hornquist, who's maybe his off ice is just so important to this team motivationally. He's got 2 cups. You say it's not going to matter to him. A guy in a similar situation, maybe a little bit more forward of advanced with no cups, is Joe Thornton. You talk about a guy who, obviously, he's playing maybe every other game, which hasn't been the case for, much of his career, which has spanned 3 decades now. But his off-ice importance and what he brings to the team and the knowledge he brings to the locker room and just the infectious attitude and this great, he makes it really like a comforting place. He's going to play a big part in the playoffs, whether or not he's playing every game, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And he's not going to play every game. Unless there's a lot of injuries. We'll see how many he gets into. Number one, Joe Thornton, he knew the situation when he came down. So this is no surprise to him. Yeah. He's a realistic guy, so it's not a problem. Number 2, he's another one of those veteran players. He keeps everything loose. And I don't think any of us will really ever know that how much Hornquist and Thornton and who knows who else, when the whole Joel Quenneville thing went down, what those guys meant to this team to keep things on the rails. Right. None of us will ever know. And even the players won't really know, because they were there to kind of keep things going in that right direction. So, yeah, look, Huberdeau, Barkov, Ekblad, these guys have been here a long time. And at different points over the last decade in their career, they've had those types of players, from Willie Mitchell to Sean Thornton to Jaromir Jagr. And now you look at guys like Hornquist and Gudis and Thornton. The Panthers have had these guys around, and people could say whatever they want. And I'm a big numbers guy. I like all that stuff, but there is a big human element to the game of hockey. And I don't think these types of players can really be, undersold of the importance that they have to a team.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's kind of one of the big strengths that this team has been, you mentioned it, it's been building, is how strong they've been in the dressing room, how happy everybody is to come to work every day. It's a fun environment. Everybody, they're growing together. The additions have all gelled well. It's really been just a really harmonious situation for the Panthers. And as you said, something we haven't seen down here. I want to say in quite a while, but really at this level, we haven't really seen it at all since, Billy Lindsay and Jovo were on the ice.
They got a great vibe. They really do. Look, you got a lot of guys too that are on this team, and this is where Bill Zito and that staff deserves a lot of credit for targeting guys who have a lot of talent or in situations that weren't very good, whether it was a team situation, whether it was the way they were used, whether it was just simply time was up in that city. And that's where the Bennetts and the Forslings and the Reinhardts and even Gudis, he wasn't that thrilled with the way they used him in Washington, for that 1 year. And Patrick Hornquist, he had a no trade clause and he waived it to come to Florida. And if you don't think the Pittsburgh Penguins giving up on him in his own mind motivates him, you're not paying attention to it. So I think that's a big part of it as well. There's a lot of guys that, I don't want to say were, left for dead in their careers. Not really the case. but a lot of guys that they didn't really know exactly where it was going, both individually and from a team standpoint. You throw Brandon Montour, and the list goes on and on. And they've all come here, and I think they've recognized that it's a great opportunity, not only to be star players, but to get contracts, make money. And by the way, I didn't even mention Verhaeghe and Duclair in that whole situation. I mean, Carter Verhaeghe, 38 months ago was in the East Coast League, and he's got to go into the coach's office in Syracuse in the AHL, tell the guy to give him playing time. And now he's on a number one line in the NHL, and he's got a long-term multi-million-dollar contract. So he's another great example.
I mean, is this just like the perfect storm that had to happen here in South Florida? Because you're combining all of these guys that have, they've had, like, as you described, they had their issues, they've had their trials and tribulations. Then they come to Florida and everybody's basically given a clean slate. They're playing in this super aggressive puck possession system that just push. And it just seems like everybody's having a blast. And it seems like a simple fix. You come here and you play and you get rewarded, but it's really not that easy. So it's pretty impressive what Bill Zito and them have built down here.
Well, part of it is, and Bill Zito will be the first to tell you this, the big pieces were already in place.
Yeah.
Now, to me, it's not easy to find those other guys. I agree with you. But when you already have Weegar, Ekblad, Huberdeau, and Barkov, it certainly makes it a better situation. And the goaltending, this year has been very good. Last year was, maybe not as good as a lot of people thought, but those guys were here as well. But those guys were here for a long time, and the team did win. So I do think it's a perfect storm. Those guys are, obviously in their prime. I mean, people forget Mackenzie Weegar was top 10 in Norris Trophy voting last year. Forget about being one of the better defensemen in the league. He was top 10 in the NHL in best defenseman voting. So it is a perfect storm. I couldn't agree with you more. And, the hiring of Bill Zito and what he had done over the last decade, 7 years in Columbus, involved in the drafts, running their AHL team, which was very successful. And just before that, being an agent, you can't ask for a better platform, literally between Bill Zito, Paul Fenton, who spent all those years in Nashville helping run those drafts, and the Predators have always been a competitive team, and then he was GM in Minnesota. Rick Dudley, who we don't have enough time for his resume. You throw in Roberto Luongo, you throw in Paul Karpelka, who is over there in Carolina, and Brett Peterson, and their analytics department led by Sonny Mehta, who's one of the best guys around. When a player comes up, there's no deep homework anybody needs to do, Dave. They all already know enough about the player, and Bill Zito likes the collaboration. Let's hash it out. So when the analytic test tells you Carter Verhaeghe in limited time with the Tampa Bay Lightning is number one in the entire NHL when he's on the ice and doesn't have the puck and goes and gets the puck, and that matches up with what some guys who had watched him play in Syracuse, including Bill Zito himself, has done. And then you go to the pro scouts like Dudley and Fenton, who are special advisors to the GM, and they saw the guy play in Tampa for the 50 games and the limited time he played during the Stanley Cup run. As you said, perfect storm is really the perfect, the perfect way to describe it.
Well, from a perfect storm, I'm going to take a pause and talk about the perfect store, which is Intense Nutrition, who sponsors this show, The Odd Man Rush. Talk about them every show. They're up in Coral Springs, right off of University Drive at 2540 North University Drive, just a few minutes away from the ice den, not far from the FLA Live Arena. And I always say it, if you're looking for those big box value prices, but you want the personal touch of a local business, you got to stop by Intense Nutrition, where they always give you superior quality and superior service. That amazing staff, they've got so much knowledge. They're going to hook you up with all your vitamin needs, your supplement needs. If you have specific stacks you need for one-on-one work, they're going to hook you up with that. Like I always say, whether it's for the cold and flu season going on right now, whether you're a peaking athlete, whether you're an aging man, whatever you need, you want to get back into shape, they're going to help you out. They've also got this amazing program called the Intense Cleanse and Detox, where you can lose 10 to 15 pounds in just 10 days. Just give them a call over at Intense Nutrition or pop by, and they will hook you up. Like I said, Intense Nutrition at 2540 North University Drive in Coral Springs, right on the corner of University and Royal Palm. Or you can give them a call, and the number's there on the screen, 954-775-0257. That's Intense Nutrition. All right, now from Intense Nutrition, I'm going to segue to the Panthers' Intense Depth, which I think right now, Goldie, is kind of like at its most muscle flexiest because they're basically as healthy as they've been since training camp. I mean, looking at practice this week, they're running 5 lines and they had an extra guy. How many teams in the NHL can legitimately say they have 5 legit forward lines that you could run at any time? It's nuts, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Even Colorado, who's, you look at what the Avalanche are doing, and boy, would that be a great final if it is Florida, Colorado. We'll see when we get there. But no, I don't think anybody has the depth they have. They really have 2 number 1 lines. Also, when you look at Huberdeau and Sam Bennett together on a second line, and I mean, it's incredible to call them a third line because they may have 3 number 1 lines with the way Marchment has emerged and Lundell, who's been unbelievable, and then Sam Reinhart, who's a 25 guy, goal, 50, 60 point guy, and he's playing on your third line. So it really is amazing talent they have up front. We'll see what happens in the next 3 weeks or so on the blue line. I definitely think they're going to be doing a little shopping.
Now, one thing that I kind of been bringing up a little bit right before the pause, and I want to get your take on it, is the last few games heading into it, we saw Jonathan Huberdeau and Sasha Barkov were kind of put back together on a line. It wasn't just the move made in the game. It was something that they kept rolling for a little while. And the more I saw it, the more I really kind of wasn't digging it. I feel like the depth that this team, it's their strength, and they're deepest and they're strongest when those 2 guys, believe it or not, are apart, I think. Because like you mentioned the chemistry between Jonathan Huberdeau and Sam Bennett and what they've done together. Sasha Barkov and Carter Verhaeghe have been an excellent pairing. So yeah, I just think at this point, it's crazy that we've come this far from a few years ago, but I really think keeping them apart is the way to go consistently.
Could not agree more. The first guy to actually realize that was Bob Bugner. If you remember the second half of that season when they made that great run, I think they went like 26-7 or something when they put Huberdeau with Trocheck. It just makes it a much better team. And especially this year because Jonathan Huberdeau, let's face it, he's always been a good player. He's always been a point getter, average a point a game, the last 5 or 6 years. He's at a different level. He's a top 10 overall player in the league in every way, not just the offensive playmaking, his consistency. So now you're looking at 2 guys, and I've joked around many times publicly and said Jonathan Huberdeau may be the league MVP and not be the best overall player on his team, which is incredible. Because Barkov, most people would say, is still the best player on the Panthers, and Huberdeau would probably agree with that as well.
Yeah. Now looking ahead, you mentioned the upcoming trade deadline. That's going to be, I think the third week of March. I think it's the third Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Right after the Panthers go out west, they go on a trip to like LA and Anaheim and Vegas, and then they come back. It's going to be interesting, Goldie. And I think the main thing that not really it's a secret at this point is that Bill Zito wants to add a little bit of depth on the blue line. Now, are they at the point? Is this like a win now mode where they would go out and, maybe mortgage some of the future for a guy like Jacob Chikrin, which is, it's a fun rumor to think about, but are they, I mean, they're really close, right? Is it worth kind of, as I said, mortgaging some of the future to bring in that big of a talent, or are they maybe like a Ben Sherratt, type, more prone to do something like that?
Well, I think 1,000% you're all in on winning this year and next year because, after this year, Barkov's money goes up. After next year, you need to keep Huberdeau. You need to keep Weegar.
If you want to keep him.
You're going to eventually have to pay Lundell 1,000%. I mean, mortgage, to me, I don't look at it as mortgaging the future. The future is Aaron Ekblad signed for 4 years, Barkov signed for 9 years, Verhaeghe signed for 4 years, Duclair for 3 years, Bennett for 3 years, Lundell's under your control for 7 years. I don't think, Lomberg's here for 2 more years. I don't think they're mortgaging, and Forsling is signed. I don't think they're mortgaging anything by giving up any of their prospects. These are not a bunch of 35-year-old guys. These are all guys in their prime, basically in their 20s, that are here for the next handful of years. So any prospects that you have to give up, I think it would almost be silly not to do it. That's mine. The same way I never have a problem with what they gave up for Montour or Bennett or Reinhart.
Yeah, but the big names that have been thrown out with the Chikrin deal has been Lundell and
Knight. Well, that's not happening. That could be thrown out by an agent and by the way, Bill Armstrong and the Coyotes are not doing their job if they don't ask for Anton Lundell. I will make the statement now, and you could put the big L on me down the road if it happens. There is 0% chance Anton Lundell is traded. End of story. Case closed.
No, to be this good he can't even drink yet with the kind of tutelage he's going to get with Barkov. And as you said, under team control for another 7 years. I mean, it's almost not
I
worth
don't
it
even think
to.
it's. I don't even think it's. I don't even think it's. It was on Twitter. Of course, they're going to ask for him.
Yeah,
Like
no,
I
you don't
said,
blame them for
a
asking,
GM's not
but
doing his job if they don't ask for him. But there's zero chance the Florida Panthers are trading Anton Lundell. Zero.
now in terms of forward depth, I mean, they're obviously stacked right now, but you can never have too much maybe experience or another scorer in there. But you think in terms of guys that might be potential trade guys who like Frank Vetrano, who's on the last year of his contract. Owen Tippett comes to mind just because he's still young, still a recent first round pick. But one thing that Bill Zito has said when in terms of bringing in trading is you have to understand the chemistry off the ice as well as on the ice, and you don't want to take a guy away that's going to screw things up. So I'm not really expecting it to be super busy just because of how good they are at right now. Aside from maybe adding a little depth to the blue line, I don't really think he's going to do a whole lot.
Well, I agree. There's not a whole lot to do, really. I mean, he wants to get a veteran forward. I guess you could try if the price is low, but that's only if guys are hurt. You're going to get rid of other guys because they have so many forwards. So it's a complete team. Obviously, there's a need there in my mind on the blue line. They've been rotating that 6D. We've seen Carlson, we've seen Ulevi, we've seen Kierstad, Prisky get some games, and certainly. I think if you could put someone on that right side with Forsling, although Ratko Gudas, I mean, maybe the most underrated forget about all the other stuff and the hits and all that, which we love. Actual defensive play, Gudas has been unbelievable the last 2 years. But when you go into the playoffs against those high-powered offensive teams, if you've got Gudas and Montour as a pair, and then you go get someone to play with Gustav Forsling, then you are a real complete 6D back there. And you really could almost use any pair at any time. So I would imagine that's the area they're targeting.
Yeah, and just in terms of like the way that the pairings should shake out, just thinking back to last season after Aaron Ekblad got hurt, how good of a pairing Weegar and Forsling were late in the season and heading into the playoffs. So if they do decide to do the big splash route and get somebody on that top pairing with Aaron Ekblad, and you can bump Weegar down to Forsling, then you have Montour and Gudas together. I mean, that's about as formidable as you could get.
Yeah, you could do that. I still think Weegar and Ekblad are going to be the number one pair. Now, if a guy falls into their lap that's on the left side, sure, you obviously have that option because Forsling's a lefty, but I think Weegar and Ekblad are so good. You talk about not messing with success. I mean, these two guys now know each other like the back of their hand. They hold each other accountable. So I look at it as I think those two will probably stay together. But again, like you say, if you do get a lefty D, and you like the deal, you do have that option, which is a great luxury to have for sure.
Yeah. Now, it's interestingly, as we exit this break, the Panthers, one of the teams that are really getting an extended break because of the way the schedules and the postponements and all that shook out. Now that teams are making their games up in the Olympic break and all that, the Panthers are basically kind of getting their third start because you had your regular season start back in October, which they got shot out of a cannon. They started amazing. Then you had your holiday break. They came out of that break, gangbusters again, looking amazing in January. Any reason to think that's not going to happen a third time?
Yeah, based on what you say, the last two times, no, there's not. I think these breaks, honestly, for this team have come at the perfect time. The first one really came at a perfect time because Barkov was still hurt. They played so well without him for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then you started to see, you can't play and win every game. Also. Without a guy that great. And then you started having COVID leak in. So I thought that one hit at a perfect time. And I think this break hits at a perfect time too. Now, they get back, they're energized a little less than half a season ago. They're playing basically every other day and trying to secure hopefully what's first place in the division. So I do think they've gotten, for this team in particular, these breaks, which were unexpected, obviously, came at the exact right time.
Now, I wanted to quickly touch on the goaltending situation. Sergei Bobrovsky, he's having the best year that he's had as a Florida Panther. I mean, that's obvious. I think last year, I think you and I have agreed on this, that last year he wasn't as bad as people as there was kind of a sentiment. He had a better year than I think maybe his statistics indicated last year. My big beef with Sergei Bobrovsky has just been the leaky goals, the ones that squeak through, because they're just demoralizing. But I think overall, this season he's been a lot better. Is it good enough for a playoff run? Is he consistent enough to take this team on that run?
Yeah, great question. Number one, he's been a great goalie in the league, a couple of Vezina trophies, but he has never done that. He's never gone and taken a team all the way. Now, he's never had a team this good. I mean, let's call it what it is. As good as some of those Columbus teams were defensively,
Yeah, they weren't
he had to
scoring
win
this
those
many
games
goals.
2-1.
Yeah.
This is a different animal. And he knows if I give up 2, I'm probably going to win. If I give up 3, I got a very good chance to win. That's not the norm. It's going to be a fascinating thing, Dave, because, in the playoffs, can you still score? Obviously, they're not going to get 6, 7, 8 every night in the playoffs, but can you score 3 or 4 every night? Can they win games 2-1? They don't play many 2-1 games, whether it's a win or a loss. That's just not the style of this team. The other thing is, as you get closer to the playoffs, I think the players will know, and they do know, that they've got to lock it down more. There's a lot of nights in the regular season they're so good. They bring it every night. They don't take nights off. That they know that even if they give up a couple of goals, it's not going to be a problem. They're going to beat those bottom half teams because they can outscore them. So it will be fascinating to see the last 2 months of the season. Do they kind of, change a little bit of the way they play from being as wide open? Do they add that other defenseman and kind of lock things down more? But yeah, I mean, look, what's his record? 3, 4, and 3 or something this year? I mean,
ridiculous.
Every time he plays, either he wins or they at least go into overtime. And forget about the shootout losses. There are no shootouts in the playoffs. So based on what Sergei Bobrovsky has done and with the players he has around him, sure, there's not a lot of reason to think that, besides the fact that he's never done it. But hey, Matthew Stafford never won a playoff game until he won the Super Bowl yesterday. So,
Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to get to, now over the years, you've called a lot of huge hockey games, not Panther games, unfortunately, but you have been kept busy in the playoff time. You've called some Stanley Cup games. You've called some historic games. You've seen some of the best teams over the last couple of decades at their best. How is this Panthers team compared to some of those really championship teams that you've called in the past?
Well, great question. I do think once you get to the postseason, you do need to lock it down a little bit more, have the ability to do that. And I think this team does. I think a lot of it is, Dave, they don't really need to do it. Now, I thought the most impressive game to me all season was the game at home against Vegas. I mean, number one, they were coming off that road trip. And number two, Vegas is one of those teams. They're built for the playoffs. They're big. They're strong. It's a hard game. And the Panthers just throttled them once they got the lead. Third period, they were fantastic. So you know that it's in them. I think they need to do it more often. I think, as you said, Sergei Bobrovsky, that one leaky goal during the game, you're not going to be able to have that. Those things get tweaked. And I don't even want to say it's a major change they need to make. It's more of a tweak they need to make. They are as good as any of those teams. And I've said it many times. Panthers would have beaten the Lightning in 6 last year, not the Lightning beating the Panthers in 6 if they had better goaltending. I mean, they had to play 3 guys during the series and did not get it done in net. I think 5-on-5, the Panthers actually outscored them 12-11 in the series. And as we know, the way those games went, goaltending was the difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the story for Tampa the last, two playoff runs is their goaltending. I mean, I think Vasilevsky's gotten a shutout in each of their last 7 or 8 series deciding wins, which is mind boggling to think about how, that's as clutch as you get, right?
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. And there's, plenty of games where Vasilevsky had to be the guy and the team didn't play great the whole game. So that's also what happens in the playoffs. There's times where you're going to need huge saves. And, again, in that series last year, the Panthers, except for Spencer Knight, really in game 5, really didn't get big saves, during that series. And they still took them to 6. And, if they could have gotten that first goal in Tampa, like you said, Vasilevsky was the difference even in that game 6. Panthers score first. They could have been back for a game 7, and then, who knows what would have happened.
You never know. Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. The best 2 words in sports, game 7.
Right.
Well, hopefully we'll have a few of those to deal with. But I want to thank you, Steve, for taking some time. And that is going to wrap up this week's episode of the Odd Man Rush, brought to you by Intense Nutrition. Thank you to my producer, Manny Chang, for doing everything to get this show on the air. And thank you again to Steve Goldstein of Bally Sports, Panthers play-by-play man, one of the best in the business. And I know Panthers fans love having him on the call. So, Goldie, thank you for joining me today again. Very much appreciated.
I want to know how you got so good at doing those live spots, but thank you. You were very smooth, Dave, on the live spot.
That was probably my best one. I'll be honest. It's been brutal. It's something I've worked at for sure. So I appreciate you saying that, because I thought that was one of my better ones.
Good stuff.
But yeah, thank you to Steve. Thank you for everybody for watching, commenting, all that good stuff. We will catch you again next week here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Again, David's work for the Odd Man Rush, brought to you by Intense Nutrition. We'll see you next week. Take care.